So I wanted to, maybe awkwardly, you can tell me after I ask the question, bring back what was once destiny is now a decision. And I may be putting this in the wrong context, but one thing that I feel I've observed with my audience over the last, say, year or two in particular, is a certain degree of growing apathy. But I think the apathy is derived from many different factors, one of which is just decision fatigue and overwhelm, which is where I do think numeracy and other basic capabilities come in very, very handy so that you're not just lost in the rapids of noise. But my question related to all of that is, to what extent, this is going to be strange wording, so it's deliberate, but it might seem odd. To what extent has religion been an advantage for you in the sense that it provides rules and maybe some automaticity to certain aspects of life? I'm not religious, but there are definitely times when I envy those who are. And I would just be curious to hear any and all thoughts on that.
Can we talk about the first part first, about the decision fatigue?
Absolutely.
So I've been very lucky. I got COVID about a month ago for the first time. It was really unpleasant. I was in bed for 3 days, I didn't have any energy, and I was tired for another 10 days. Just beat. But I had it lucky. I didn't end up on a ventilator. I didn't die. It's like it was a bad flu in the Omicron phase here. But for 2 years, especially when I was in the United States before I came here, I had I think for most of us, it was a very unusual life experience. It was a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit like war. So war, if you think back, say the bombing of London, you think about it, every night, sirens go off, you go down underground in London, or you go to some place of shelter, and you come back out. If you're lucky, your house is still there. If you're not lucky, your house is gone, and maybe somebody died who you cared about. And can you imagine that night after night after night? And after a while, you'd say, it's really hard, but the hardest part of it is I don't know when it's going to end. If you just tell me when it's going to end, I can handle it. Just give me the arrival date. What's the ETA of peace? And of course, most wars, they think, it'll be over in a week. Civil War, it'll be over in a week, 2 weeks, month. Most wars drag on. As hard as COVID was, and again, it's embarrassing to compare it to war. Can you imagine what it was like to be in London or Berlin or Japan? Not in the United States, because the United States was pretty protected, but in these countries where day in, day out, your loved ones were dying, and you don't know when it's going to end, and you, more than anything else, you just want, what do you want? Just give me a normal day where I don't have to be afraid. Don't have to worried that someone's going to die. So COVID gave us a tiny, thank God, relatively much smaller taste of that. And for most people, I thought, for me, it was incredibly hard. It was like, when am I going to be able to fill in the blank, right? When am I going to have I just want I want to go out to a bar and see some friends and have a drink, or go to a party, or better yet, go to a wedding, or go to a funeral, right? There are people who missed funerals, who missed weddings, who missed wonderful life events and couldn't participate. And so I think that really wore us down, wore a lot of us down, right? It's very, very demoralizing. There's some wonderful things about it. You faced your mortality. Most of us, I think, had to reckon with the fact, when I got my vaccine finally, it's like, now I felt like Superman. I forgot I'm still going to die. That stinks, doesn't it? Right? But it forced you to remember that you're going to die. You might die soon from COVID in a hospital on a ventilator, or horrible way to go. And if you're lucky, you don't get it, but you're still going to die. And I think for a lot of those two things, when's it going to end? And I am mortal. And most of us, again, coming back to our theme of things you don't want to think about or easy not to think about, the fact that we're going to die is not pleasant. Most of us push that one off. So I thought that those two things really wore us down. So what does that have to do with religion? I think religion's really interesting. Obviously, it's a fascinating part of human experience, both glorious and inglorious. I think people who aren't religious think it makes life easy in the way that you suggested, the automaticity. Things are taken care of. And there is a piece of that, by the way. I keep the Jewish Sabbath. So if you say to me, I've got tickets to see Paul McCartney, who I don't particularly like, but I'd like to go see him. Not my favorite musician, but he's at the Meadowlands and Bruce Springsteen's going to show up, which happened recently. I don't know if it was a Friday night or not, but if you said, you want to go? I'd say, oh, yeah, I want to go. Oh, it's Friday night. Oh, I can't go. So for me, it does rule out certain decisions that would otherwise you'd have to weigh. There's no doubt about that. But I think a lot of people think that a religious life is one that's free of doubt and is a bunch of angels sitting around singing, strumming guitars, a bunch of good Martin guitars, singing some Kumbaya song. It's really not the main thing about religion that's attractive to me, and maybe to other people, because I have plenty of doubts, by the way, and I think most religious people in the modern era struggle with faith. I think I shouldn't say most, many do. For me, it comes back to what we talked about earlier. I didn't write about this in the book, but it gives life a certain texture. And part of what I'm trying to say in that book, in Wild Problems, is that there's more to life than the emotional ups and downs and what we call fun or happiness. And there's a certain texture to life that comes, say, from being married or being a parent or moving to Israel or having a certain career, maybe in a profession that makes you feel full and yourself. And that texture is, to me, a lot of what a religious life is about. It's again, not that different from many of the things we've been talking about. There are Friday nights where I wished I could do something I choose not to do more globally. But the overall impact has a effect on how I see myself and how I go through the world that I find meaningful. I don't think it's accessible to everyone. For me, in my experience, a little bit like music. Some people are tone deaf and they cannot enjoy music the way a great musician can, or even a mediocre musician. And other people have a great ear, and all that music makes their heart sing all the time. And they live in a different world than the rest of us. And I think there's a whole continuum of both music and religious/spiritual practice that we inhabit that is personal, that is person-specific. It's like, I give you my favorite novel, and you're going to love this. And it didn't speak to me. That's what happens. And there's certain religious experiences or spiritual experiences, spiritual practices that don't speak to certain people because they're just not hardwired that way, I think. I don't know.